The ship appeared on their sensors like a bad thought. One moment the patrol route was clean, empty space, cold and quiet, the way Commander Seth liked it. The next thing was sitting at the edge of the Delvari expanse, right on the border between Breath Collective Space and the region, the charts labeled in plain, boring text as human territory. Severath stood at the center of the Patience of Stars, the Breath flagship, and stared at the contact marker on the display wall. It was a single blip, soft orange, unmoving. "Origin?" he asked. His sensor officer, a young Breath named Uhl, tapped her console and tilted her long neck at an angle that meant she was unsure. Human Design Commander registry signals match their military class. "It appears to be a warship." The bridge went quiet. Not the quiet of fear, not yet. More the quiet of a room where everyone had just heard something unexpected and was waiting for someone else to react first. Seth crossed his forearms behind his back. He had served in the Brethren patrol fleet for 30 years. He had encountered 3 different alien civilizations during that time, and he had never once needed to fire his weapons at any of them. The galaxy was a large place. Civilized species, in his experience, preferred to stay in their own corners of it. The humans were different. Everyone knew that. But knowing something and standing 2 light minutes from proof of it were different things entirely. "One ship?" he asked. "One ship, Commander. What class?" Ulu checked again. She checked twice. "Our records listed as a human designation, a stalwart class heavy cruiser. An older model by their standards." Severath's translator, Chip, supplied the word stalwart in breath. It meant something close to a stubborn thing that refuses to fall down. He filed that away. "Is it moving?" "No, Commander. It is a holding position. It has not hailed us. It is not running dark. Its drive signature is visible. Its reactor is active. It is simply there." One of the younger bridge officers, a male named Dren, who had never been further than the inner patrol routes before this posting, leaned forward over his console. Maybe it broke down. Nobody laughed. Not because it was a bad guess, because it was a hopeful one. And hope was not something professional soldiers allowed themselves too much of. "Bring us to 3 light minutes," Sereth said. "Hold there. No aggressive posture. Run a passive scan first." The Patience of Stars was a fine vessel. 600 millimeters of breath engineering, elegant, efficient, designed for endurance rather than raw force. She could stay in open space for 2 full years without resupply. Her hull was layered reactive ceramic over a stress alloy frame. Her weapon suite carried 16 long-range kinetic batteries, 4 plasma cannon clusters, and 2 torpedo launchers that could fire 8 at a time. She was in any conversation about military power in this region of the galaxy, a serious ship. She began moving toward the human vessel at 1/4 drive. The crew moved with her, calm and professional, everyone at their stations, everyone watching the orange blip on the display wall. It still wasn't moving. The passive scan took 11 minutes. During those 11 minutes, Seth drank a cup of warm meth broth that his aide brought him, reviewed the collective last 6 diplomatic exchanges with the human government, which were all polite and all completely empty of real content, and watched Uhl's station light up piece by piece as the scan data came in. At the 9-minute mark, Uhl stopped moving. She was still sitting at her console. Her fingers were still on the keys, but she had gone very still in the particular way that meant she had seen something and was currently deciding what to do with it. Seth set down his broth. "Report." Uhl turned around slowly. She was a calm young officer. Good instincts, clean work, never dramatic. She was looking at him now with an expression he had seen on soldiers exactly twice before in his career. Both times right before something went badly wrong. "Commander," she said, "I think you should come and look at this yourself." He walked to her station. He looked at the display. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. The passive scan had mapped the human vessel's outer hull and was pulling structure data from its reactor and driving emissions. Standard procedure. The data usually told you the size of the ship, the rough age of its technology, and whether it was a civilian or military class. What Seth was looking at now was not standard. The human ship was 740 mm long. That was already larger than it should have been for the class listed in Breath records. His record said Stalwart-class cruisers ran about 620 meters. Someone had made this one bigger or added to it or both. The hull gave off heat signatures in 14 distinct clusters, which was consistent with multiple independent reactor loops. That was unusual. Most warships ran one primary reactor with backup systems. 14 clusters meant either 14 reactors or a single reactor that had been partitioned 14 ways. Either option was strange. Either option meant that you could destroy large pieces of this ship and it would keep running. The drive emissions showed 3 separate engine systems, not one main drive and 2 backups. 3 full independent main drives, each large enough to move the ship on its own. And the weapons. The passive scan couldn't count them. Not exactly. Passive scans read emissions, not structure. But the energy signatures coming off the hull were consistent with weapon systems that were currently powered down and cold. Seth could see the signatures. He could not count them cleanly because there were too many signatures reading at once, and the scan software kept rerunning the numbers as if it couldn't believe its own output. Active scan, he said. Ul nodded. She ran it. Active scans were faster and cleaner, but they were also visible. If the human ship didn't know they were there before, and Seth suspected it did, human sensors had a well-documented reputation. It would certainly be known now. The active scan took 90 seconds. The display wall filled up. The patience of stars had a sensor suite that the best military was genuinely proud of. It could map a planet's surface from orbit with enough detail to count trees. It could read the internal temperature of a reactor through 8 meners of shielding. It had been designed and refined over 100 years to be the best tool of its kind the collective could produce. Right now, looking at the data coming back from 740 meners of human engineering, the sensor suite seemed to be working very hard and still not entirely sure what it was looking at. The hull was the first thing. The active scan mapped it in full. The outer layer was a composite Sevrath system flagged as unknown alloy, high density, thermal absorbent. Under that was a second layer that read as a kind of reactive foam. The scan couldn't classify at all. Under that was a structural frame, and woven through all of it, like veins in a body, were what appeared to be channels carrying some kind of fluid. Seth had seen hull designs with coolant channels before. This wasn't that. The fluid was moving too fast and under too much pressure. It looked more than anything else like the ship was circulating something the way a living body circulates blood. Not for cooling, for something else. The scan couldn't tell him what. The weapons came next, and the display wall had to reorganize itself to fit the list. 42 kinetic mass drivers arranged in 11 independent batteries. Each battery could fire at a different target. The barrels were long. The scan estimated the projectile velocity at somewhere between 30 and 40 km/s at muzzle exit, which was nearly double the output of the patience of the star's own kinetic systems. 16 plasma cannon imp placements. Cold right now, but warm enough to still read clearly. Large ones. The scan flagged the imp placements as heavy assault class and put a note in the margin that said the size of the imp placements was inconsistent with a ship of this tonnage, which was the sensor system's way of saying that whoever put these weapons on this ship had put on more than the ship had a right to carry. 8 torpedo tubes, 4 on the forward face, and 4 distributed across the midsection. The tubes were empty, which told Seth the torpedoes were stored internally. He looked at the internal volume estimate and did the math. The ship could carry somewhere between 300 and 400 torpedoes, possibly more if they were stacked in ways the scan wasn't reading cleanly. 2 systems the scan labeled plainly as unknown and stopped there. No classification, no comparison in the database, just the energy signature, the position on the hull, and a little warning flag that meant the software didn't have a category to put them in. Seth stared at those 2 unknown systems for a while. Then he looked at the crew data. The active scan reads, life signs. Breath ships kept accurate crew counts for their own vessels. It helped with emergency response, evacuation planning, and daily logistics. The count for a ship the size of a stalwart-class cruiser by Berth standards would have been around 800. A large crew, one appropriate for a ship of that complexity. The human ship had 412 life signs aboard. Seth read it twice. He pulled up the ship size again. 740 men, 14 reactor signatures, 3 drive systems, 58 confirmed weapon imp placements, plus 2 unknowns. Internal volume sufficient to store 400 torpedoes. 412 people. Run the crew count again, he said. Ull ran it again. 412. Cross-check with any interference or shielded sections. She did. The number held. If anything, she said it was possible the scan was missing some sections of the ship. There could be fewer people aboard than 412. There were likely not more. Dren, the young officer at the far console, spoke up again. His voice had lost all of the casual ease it had before. How does a ship that size run on 400 people? Nobody answered him because nobody had an answer that felt complete. Seth had an incomplete one. He'd read the intelligence reports on human ship operations. The collective observers had watched human vessels for decades, watching from a safe distance, the way you watched a strange animal you didn't want to startle. The report said that humans used automation in ways that other species generally didn't. Not because they were lazy, because they were pragmatic. They built their ships to run with small crews, so that those crews could take casualties and keep fighting so that if half the people on board were dead, the other half could still operate every system at full effectiveness. They built their ships to survive losing half their crew. He put that thought on a shelf in his mind and left it there. Any response to the active scan? He asked. Not yet, Ull said. Then a moment later, Commander, they're hailing us. The bridge went quiet again. This quiet was different from the first one. This one had weight to it. Audio or visual? Audio? Open it. The channel came online with a small click and a breath of static. Then a voice. Human voices always sounded strange through the translator chip. Too many tonal shifts, too much air in the words. Something almost rough about the way they shaped sound. This voice was low, steady, the kind of voice that was not performing steadiness, the kind that had simply arrived at it, the way a stone arrives at the bottom of a river. This is Captain Alavos of the United Earthship Unyielding. We've been sitting here for about 2 hours. We saw you come up on our sensors a while back. We don't have any problem with you. We're not here for any aggressive action. We're resupply delayed and holding position while we wait for our logistics ship. A pause. Static. You've just run an active scan on us, which I understand. I would do the same. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you want us to move, we'll move. We're not looking for trouble today. Another pause. Something in the background. The faint ambient noise of a bridge, quiet and controlled. Balls in your court. The channel stayed open. Sevrath stood in the center of his bridge and looked at the display wall, which was still full of data about the Unyielding, its weapons, its hull, its 412 crew members, who were apparently enough to run a ship that by breath standards needed 800. He looked at the 2 unknown system signatures on the hull that his sensors couldn't classify. He looked at the line that said, Whole Composite Unknown Alloy High Density Thermal Absorbent. He looked at the 3 independent main drives. Then he looked at his own crew, 61 of them scattered across the bridge in their stations watching him waiting. She said they're not looking for trouble today, Dren said softly. Seth let that word sit. Today, not ever, not in general, just today. He straightened his back. 30 years in the patrol fleet. He had never needed to fire his weapons. He intended to keep that record intact. Ooh. He said, Get me Dr. Nevin from the science deck. Tell her to bring her team to the sensor analysis room. I want a full breakdown of everything we just scanned. He paused. Tell her to pay particular attention to the 2 unknowns in the hall. Yes, Commander. He walked back to the center of the bridge. The orange blip on the display wall sat where it had always sat, unmoving, patient, unyielding. He thought about the name of his own ship, the Patience of Stars. It had always seemed like a fine name for a long-range patrol vessel, dignified, reflective. Right now, staring at that blip, he thought maybe the humans had the better idea. Name your ship after what you want it to be. Name it after what you need it to be. Respond to the captain, he said. Tell her we have no hostile intentions. Tell her we're grateful for her patience. He thought for one more second. Tell her we may have a few questions if she doesn't mind. Uhl sent the message. The unyielding said nothing for a moment. Then Captain Voss's voice came back flat and easy, and completely without urgency. Take your time. Seth looked at the data on the wall, at the weapons list, at the unknown hull composite, at the 412 names that were somehow enough. He pulled up a chair. This was going to take a while. Down in the science deck, Dr. Nevin was already pulling on her analysis coat, already moving toward her station with the look of someone who had been handed a puzzle that wasn't going to let her sleep. She had seen the scan data. She already had questions of her own. Dr. Nevin had been a scientist for 22 years. She had studied dead stars, living planets, the fossils of species that had gone extinct before the breath had learned to write. She had held in her hands the calcified bones of creatures that had ruled whole ecosystems for 1,000,000 years before something ended them. She thought she had a good sense of scale, of what was large and what was small, of what should cause alarm and what was merely interesting. She was revising that opinion now. The sensor analysis room on the lower science deck was small and bright, with 6 workstations arranged in a horseshoe around a central display table. Doctor. Nevin stood at the table with her 2 senior analysts, Voss, who specialized in weapon systems, and Merritt, who did materials and structure, and together the 3 of them looked at the scan data from the human ship the way you might look at an animal you'd found in your kitchen, trying to understand how it got there, trying to figure out what it ate. Start with the hull, Nevin said. Walk me through it from outside in. Voss pulled up the layered structure diagram. It hung in the air above the table in pale blue light. The outer layer is a composite alloy, he said. Our analysis software has no match for it in the database. It's pulling the closest analogies, and none of them are close. The density is higher than anything we use. The thermal absorption rating is stopped. Checked, continued. It's high enough that our plasma cannon projection suggests 3 to 4 sustained hits from our heavy imp placements before the outer layer begins to degrade. Nevin looked at him. 3 to 4 hits. Yes. From our heavies. Yes. The Patience of Stars carried 4 heavy plasma cannon clusters. They were the primary offensive armament of the ship. 1 hit from a heavy imp placement was in the tactical literature the Breath military used, listed as sufficient to breach the hull of most known military vessels and cause catastrophic damage to internal systems. 3 to 4 hits before the outer layer began to degrade. Continue. Nevin said under the outer layer there's a secondary layer. This one is different. It's a foam composite, very porous, full of small air pockets. Our best interpretation is that it's an energy dispersal layer. When something hits the outer hull hard enough to transmit force inward, this layer absorbs and scatters the shock. It would significantly reduce the structural damage from kinetic impact. Merritt spoke without looking up from her own console. 2 hull layers, different functions. 1 for heat, 1 for impact. Yes, F said. Separate problems, separate solutions layered on top of each other. Yes. Merritt made a short sound that was not quite a word. And then the frame, Voss continued. High-grade stress alloy. Not unusual, but the frame geometry is. He pulled up the structural diagram and rotated it. Look at the cross-bracing pattern. Do you see it? Nevin leaned in. The frame of the human ship was not built in the standard way. Breath ships used a central spine with ribs extending outward like a skeleton. Most known species used some variation of this. It was efficient. It was logical. The load transferred cleanly along predictable paths. The human ship's frame was built in interlocking hexagons, hundreds of them nested inside each other at multiple scales. The load path from any impact point would spread out in 6 directions simultaneously. And then those 6 paths would each split into 6 more. Instead of a spine that could be broken, it was a web that had no single point of failure. You could blow a hole in the hull, and the structure around it would redistribute the stress to every other part of the frame automatically. It's designed to absorb damage without collapsing. Merritt said it wasn't a question. She was confirming a thought. It's designed to keep functioning after taking damage that would destroy other ships, Nevin said, which was slightly different and slightly worse. Nobody argued with the distinction. The fluid channels were Merritt's territory. She had been working on them since she got the data. And when Nevin turned to her for the report, Merritt pulled up a diagram that looked for a moment uncomfortably like the vascular system of a large animal. The channels run through the entire whole structure. Merritt said the fluid they carry is under high pressure, similar to arterial pressure in large biological organisms. The composition is partly coolant, partly a polymer compound I haven't fully identified yet. It moves fast. The flow rate suggests the whole system cycles every 4 minutes or so. What does it do? Nevin asked. The best current theory, Merritt said, is that it's a self-rep system. The polymer compound has properties consistent with a fast-setting structural adhesive. When the hull takes damage, a breach, a crack, a fracture in the composite, the fluid in the nearest channels would be exposed to vacuum or heat, and the polymer would activate and begin to set. Silence. The ship can repair its own hull, Foss said. Partially automatically in real time, Merritt looked up during combat while it's still being hit. Nevin thought about this. She thought about a ship that absorbed hits from plasma cannons across multiple hull layers, redistributed structural stress through a hexagonal web frame, and then while all of that was happening, began sealing its own wounds with pressurized polymer fluid. She thought about what it would be like to fight a ship like that. She moved on before the thought finished forming. The weapons analysis took the longest. Foss went through it carefully, because he was the kind of analyst who believed that carefulness was always faster in the end, and because the data was detailed enough to deserve the time. 42 kinetic mass drivers. He pulled up the barrel specifications. The projectiles they fired, he was working from the barrel geometry, and the power draw of the electromagnetic accelerators were dense metal slugs. Probably a heavy element fired at velocities between 30 and 40 kilometers. At those speeds, the kinetic energy on impact was. He put the calculation on the display table and watched Nevin's face as she looked at it. She looked at it for a long time. The Patience of the Stars had 16 kinetic batteries. They were good weapons. At engagement range, each one hit with enough force to shatter the forward hull section of a light cruiser. The math on the human ship's kinetic drivers suggested that each one hit harder than that. There were 42 of them in 11 independent batteries that could each track different targets. One ship, Nevin said quietly. One ship, Foss confirmed. The plasma cannons were next. 16 imp placements. He had already told Commander Sevrath that they were oversized for a ship of this class. Now he elaborated. The imp placements were not just large. They were arranged in overlapping fields of fire so that any point around the hull of the Unyielding was covered by at least 3 separate cannons simultaneously. There was no angle of approach that wasn't covered. There was no blind spot. Someone thought very carefully about where to put these. Merritt observed. Yes. Foss said someone who expected to be attacked from multiple directions at once. That landed on the room without comment. The torpedoes, 8 tubes, 400 or more in storage. The stored torpedoes were the part of the scan Foss was least sure about, because the warheads were shielded and he couldn't read them cleanly. He could read the drive systems. The torpedoes were self-guided with independent tracking and small onboard correction thrusters that could adjust course after launch. They would be very difficult to intercept. He could read the physical dimensions. They were large, which suggested large warheads, which suggested a yield that he estimated, but declined to state with confidence, because even the low end of his estimate was large enough that stating it out loud in a small room felt unwise. He left the numbers on the display table and let Nevin and Merritt read them in silence. And then he got to the 2 unknowns. I've been working on these since we got the data, Foss said. He pulled both signatures up. They sat on the display table in amber, the color the analysis software used when it couldn't make a classification. Here and here, port midship and the forward dorsal surface. "What have you got?" Nevin asked. "Not enough. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our records. They're not powered up. Whatever these systems are, they're in a standby state right now, which means I'm reading residual output only. That's like trying to describe a fire from the smoke it left behind after it went out. Make your best guess." Voss was quiet for a moment. "Then the port midship signature is large, very large. The power draw and standby alone is comparable to our main reactor's output at 30%. Whatever that system does when it's active is going to require an enormous amount of energy. The geometry of the housing suggests a directional output. It points outward, not inward, so it's not an internal system. It projects something into space." He paused. "My best guess, and I want to be clear that this is a guess, is that it's some kind of directed energy weapon on a scale we don't have a reference for. And the forward dorso, smaller, different profile. The signature is more complex. Lots of distinct components reading at slightly different frequencies. If I had to compare it to something in our database, the closest match is," he looked uncomfortable, "a suppression array." Merritt straightened up. "A suppression array. The closest match," Voss said. "I'm not certain. A suppression array was a specific technology, one that the VR had developed 60 years ago and quietly classified because even its own engineers had been uncertain about the ethics of using it. It disrupted the electronic systems of nearby vessels, not by destroying them, by making them malfunction, stutter, and misread their own data. A ship caught in a suppression field would find its weapons misfiring, its sensors giving wrong readings, its navigation system losing certainty about where it was. It didn't blow up other ships. Fully decided what to do with. Seth closed the file. He looked at the orange blip on the display wall. The unyielding, sitting there, patient and quiet, an ordinary working ship by human standards, a backbone of the fleet ship, a ship they built because they needed a lot of them. He thought about Captain Voss's voice. "Take your time." He picked up the Keith broth and drank it even though it had gone cold. Dr. Nevin stood across from him on the other side of the command table and waited. She had learned in the years she'd worked with Sevrath that he needed a moment to put things in order before he spoke. She gave him the moment. "The cargo section," he said finally. "Yes, tell me." She told him. The object 40 mech long, 12 meter wide, shielded past anything she could scan through, warm the way an active machine was warm, unknown. Sevrath listened without expression. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Then your theory." "I don't have one I'm comfortable with," Nevin said. "The shielding is heavier than anything I can explain for standard cargo. The size is consistent with a weapons platform, a secondary vessel, or," she paused, "or something that required very serious containment." "Containment," Seth said. "That's one interpretation of heavy shielding." "Yes. Something inside that needed to be kept inside." They looked at each other. "I need more information," Seth said. "I need it from the source." Nevin understood what he meant. "You're going to ask the captain directly." "I'm going to have a conversation," he said. "Whether that conversation gives me real information depends on the captain." He stood up from the command table. "But I think it might. She's been straightforward so far. I don't know if that's because she has nothing to hide or because she has nothing she worries about us finding." He walked back toward the bridge. Nevin fell into step beside him. "Commander," she said quietly. "Fosses filled the larger ships." I read it, and he didn't answer immediately. They walked down the corridor, and the hum of the patience of stars moved around them, familiar and steady. Finally, he said, "It means we are going to have this conversation in a very particular way." "What way?" "Politely," he said. The channel opened again, and this time Sevrath spoke to himself. "Captain Voss, This is Commander Sevrath of the Vreth Collective Vessel Patience of Stars *. I appreciate your patience with our scan. I hope you understand it was standard procedure. There was a short pause. Then the captain's voice came back. Understood, Commander. No offense taken. I'd have done the same. I'd like to ask you a few questions if you're willing. Nothing hostile. My science team has some gaps in their data, and I'd like to fill them if I can. Another pause, shorter this time. Sure. What do you want to know? Seth had prepared a list. He had arranged it in order from least sensitive to most. He started at the beginning. Your ship. Our records listed as an *stalwart *class cruiser, but the measurements don't match our records for that class. It's larger than we expected. Yeah. The unyielding asterisk is a modified hull, stretched frame, extended cargo, and weapons bays. We did a refit about 6 years ago. A brief pause. She was already old when I got her. I just kept adding to her. You've commanded her for a long 11 years. Seth let a beat pass. That's a long time with one ship. She suits me. There was something in the captain's voice when she said it. Not sentiment exactly. Something quieter and harder. We've been through enough together that I don't feel like starting over with a new hull. Nevin stood off to the side of the bridge where she could hear but not be seen on any visual feed. Wrote something in her notes. 11 years of damage on the hull consistent with extended combat. The captain has been aboard through all of it. The whole composite, Sevrath said. Our sensors couldn't match it to anything in our database. Would you be willing to tell us what it is? Captain Voss was quiet for a moment. Not a suspicious quiet, a thinking quiet. It's a human alloy. We call it hardskin informally. The technical designation is a long number I don't have memorized. It was developed about 15 years ago. Standard issue on military hulls now. A pause. Is that what was giving your sensors trouble partly? Seventh said the thermal absorption rating throws a lot of people. The first time someone hits us with a plasma burst and watches it basically not do anything, they tend to react. Basically not do anything, Nevin wrote. She underlined it. Seth moved down his list. The drive system has 3 independent mains. The captain explained it without being asked twice. Standard on *stalwart class after the refit program. The original design had 1 main and 2 backups. The refit doctrine changed the philosophy. All 3 were now full mains. You could lose 2 of them and still maneuver. We learned some lessons, Voss said, and didn't explain what lessons or where they had been learned. Seth didn't ask. He asked about the crew count. 412 for a ship that size. We run lean. The captain said, everything that can be automated is automated. My crew handles what the systems can't. A pause in a fight. Fewer crew means fewer people to lose, and the systems don't panic. She said that last part without any particular weight to it. The way you said something that was obvious and had been obvious for a long time. Fewer people to lose. So thought about that. A warship built around the assumption that it would take casualties. Built around the assumption that you would lose people and needed to keep fighting anyway. The whole design philosophy, the redundant drives, the automatic systems, the hexagonal frame that kept functioning when pieces of it were destroyed, all of it pointing at the same idea. This ship was designed to survive things that would stop other ships. Captain, he said, may I ask something more personal? You can ask. The hull of your ship shows significant battle damage, old and new. It's been repaired many times. What has the unyielding been through? The channel was quiet for a moment. Seth waited. She's been in 7 major engagements, Voss said. Finally, 2 border actions early in her service life before my time, then 5 since I took command. Her voice didn't change. It stayed at that same even level. The worst one was 4 years ago. We took a broadside from a Kareth battle group, 3 ships. We lost our forward weapons section and 80 crew in the first pass. Seth waited. We killed all 3 of them. No elaboration, no detail beyond that. She said it the way you stated a conclusion after showing your work. The work was done. The conclusion was simple. Seth heard someone on his bridge make a very small sound and quickly suppress it. He didn't look to see who. "The Keith," he said carefully. "I'm not familiar with that name. You wouldn't be. They're not around anymore." The channel hummed with static. "I see," Seth said. Nevin had stopped writing notes. She was just listening now. She was listening to the captain's voice the way you listen to a river, trying to figure out how deep it was from the sound of it moving. Captain Voss was not cold. She didn't sound cruel or angry or proud. She sounded like someone recounting a difficult thing that was behind her and would always be behind her. The way old soldiers sometimes sounded. The way people who had survived things that didn't have good names sometimes sounded. Seth reached the bottom of his prepared list. He paused for a moment. Then he went off the list. "Captain, I want to be direct with you about something. Go ahead. Our scan picked up an object in your cargo section. The rear section is heavily shielded. Our sensors couldn't read it. I would normally not ask about cargo. That's not my business. But the shielding on that object is heavier than anything I've encountered before, and I find I'm curious about it. A silence longer than the others." Seth let it sit. He didn't feel it. He just waited. "That's a fair question," Voss said finally. "And you've been straight with me, so I'll be straight with you." A pause. "That object is why we're out here. It's not standard cargo. It's a recovered item. We pulled it out of a debris field about 3 weeks ago. A battle site, old one, decades old, maybe older. We don't know what it is," she continued. "That's the honest answer. It was broadcasting a signal when we found it. Very faint. We pulled it in for analysis. We've had our own people looking at it for 3 weeks, and they haven't given me a clean answer yet." "What kind of signal?" Seth asked. "The kind that doesn't match any format we have on record." The bridge of the asterisk Patience of Stars was very quiet. "We're taking it back to a research facility for proper analysis. That's what the resupply stop is for. We're waiting for our escort. Protocol says we don't move something like this without one." "Something like what exactly?" Seth asked. "Something unknown." Her voice was careful now, not hiding anything, being precise. "We've run every scan we have on it. The shielding is our own. We put that on it after we picked it up. Standard containment procedure for unknown recovered objects. What's inside the shielding? We still don't fully know." "It's warm," she added. "It's been warm since we found it. Consistent temperature, no variation. Whatever's powering it has been running for a very long time." Sevrath looked at Nevin across the bridge. She was looking back at him with an expression that said she had already thought of the same thing he was thinking, and had also not yet figured out what to do with it. An unknown object broadcasting a signal in no known format. Warm with no identified power source. Decades old, found in an old battle site. Old enough to predate the human fleet. Possibly old enough to predate a species the humans had already confirmed was not around anymore. "I'll tell you what I told my own crew," Captain Voss said. Her voice was level, measured. "I don't know what it is. I know what we do with things we don't know. We take them somewhere smart people can look at them properly. We don't guess, and we don't panic." A short pause. "That's the protocol. And when the smart people looked at it properly," Sevrath said slowly, "and they find out what it is, what happens then?" The captain was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll know," she said. "And knowing is always better than not knowing, even when what you find out is bad. Especially then," she added. And there was something in the way she said it, not hope exactly, not dread exactly, that Seth could not name in any language his translator chip carried. The channel stayed open. The unyielding stayed where it was, warm and still and patient, and carrying something in its belly that no one had been able to identify for 3 weeks, and that had been running quietly and without stopping for longer than anyone could confidently say. Sevrath looked at the orange blip on the display wall. He thought about the Cath, whoever they had been. He thought about 3 ships meeting one and only one coming home. He thought about what Captain Voss had said. "We don't panic. and what it meant that she had felt the need to say it at all, not as reassurance for him, as a statement of method. Snorts, a thing they did, instead of panicking, because they had found over time that panicking was not useful. He wondered very briefly what had taught them that. He thought maybe he didn't need to ask. He thought maybe the hull of the unyielding asterisk marked and scarred and repaired over 11 years and more was already the answer to that question. "Thank you, Captain," he said. "Well, let me know if we have further questions." "Anytime, Commander." A pause. "You're welcome to hold your position. The company doesn't bother us." The channel clicked to standby. Seth stood in the quiet of his bridge and breath once carefully. Commander Ull said from her station. Her voice was controlled but thin at the edges. Long-range sensors just picked up a jump signature inbound, bearing on the asterisk unyielding's asterisk position. "How many?" Ull checked. Checked again. 4 ships. Commander human design. 1 is very large. The others are escort classes. Seth nodded slowly. The logistics escort right on time. He looked at Dren, who was staring at the display wall with the particular look of a young officer who was trying to decide something and hadn't finished deciding it. "Dren," Seth said. The young officer looked up. "When you get home," Seth said quietly, "and someone asks you what you saw out here today, be accurate. Don't dramatize. Don't minimize." He looked at the blip on the display wall at the orange dot. That was a ship that had killed 3 and come back and kept going. Just be accurate. Dren nodded. He didn't speak. The 4 human ships dropped out of the jump and began moving toward the unyielding. Slow and easy. The way things moved when they had nowhere urgent to be and all the time in the world to get there. Seth watched them come. The senior staff meeting took place in the small briefing room behind the bridge. 6 people around a narrow table, Sevrath at the head, Nevin to his left, his executive officer, a tall, quiet breath named Goss to his right, Foss and Merritt at the far end, and the ship's tactical chief, Commander Breath, who had been running silent calculations on her personal console since the escort ships arrived, and had the look of someone whose calculations were not making her happy. "Lay it out," Seth said. Goss went first. Goss always went first. That was what executive officers were for, to say the plain thing before everyone else had a chance to complicate it. "We have a human warship sitting 2 light minutes from us," Goss said. "It is now accompanied by 4 additional human vessels, one of which is considerably larger. We are 1 ship. We are outgunned. We are not in any immediate danger because the humans have not indicated any hostile intent. Our options are to hold position, withdraw, or attempt to open a more formal diplomatic dialogue." "Formal dialogue with whom?" Breath asked. "Our diplomatic authority ends at the patrol level. This is above that, which means we contact the command." Goss said, "Which takes time." Foss said the relay to the nearest collective station is 6 hours at standard transmission speed. "Then we have 6 hours to hold our position and behave professionally," Sevrath said. He looked at Breath. "What's the read on the escort group?" Breath pulled up the scan data on the escort ships. She had been running it in parallel since they jumped in. Quiet and efficient the way she did everything. She put it on the table display now, and nobody at the table said anything for a moment. The escort group was 4 ships. 3 of them were smaller than the unyielding, lean, fast-looking things that the collective's database identified as *Javelin *class destroyers. Quick ships built for interception. Each one carrying a weapon suite that Foss had already privately noted was more than sufficient to end the * patience of stars in a very short engagement. The 4th ship. The 4th ship was what Commander Breath had been looking at on her personal console. It was not an Sovereign class dreadnought. Seth could see that much and feel a fraction of relief. The Sovereign ships were larger. What this was, the collective's database gave it a designation tag, and then a note in red text that said, *limited observation data estimate only, was something called an Bastion class fleet carrier. 900 meter long, the largest human military vessel the collective had ever logged an observation of outside of the Sovereign class. The scan showed hangar bays along its midline, large ones, multiple. The collective's record on this class was sparse, but it contained one key piece of information noted by an observer who had gotten close enough to count before prudently departing. A bastion typically carried between 60 and 80 smaller combat craft in those hangar bays. Fast, armed, individually piloted attack ships that could operate independently of the carrier over significant distances. 1 Bastion Asterisk, 3 Javelins Asterisk, the Unyielding Asterisk, and the Patience of a Star Asterisk alone. Goss summarized it without being asked. We are significantly outmatched. This is not a situation where tactical considerations are relevant. We hold our position. We maintain communication, and we wait for direction from command. Agreed, Sevrath said. He looked at Breath. No active weapons status. Nothing that could read as preparation. We are a patrol vessel conducting an authorized observation. That is all we are. Breath nodded. She didn't look thrilled, but she was professional enough that her expression said, I understand the logic, rather than I disagree. That was all he needed from her right now. He turned to Nevin. Tell me the rest of what you have. Nevin had been working through the night with her team. The scan data was deep enough that there was still more to find if you kept digging. And she kept digging. The life sign data was where she had spent the last several hours. The active scan had returned biological readings on all 412 crew members of the Unyielding. Not detailed medical records, just the broad strokes. Body temperature, mass range, movement patterns, metabolic rate. It was the kind of data you could glean from the outside if your sensors were good enough. The collective sensors were good enough. Humans are physically unusual, Nevin said. She had prepared a brief summary because she knew this group, and she knew they needed things said plainly. We've had biological data on them for decades, but looking at it concentrated in one place in the context of what we know about this ship, some things become clearer. She listed them. Body temperature is high, significantly higher than most known species. A human body ran hot all the time, burning energy continuously at a rate most species reserved for peak exertion. The metabolic cost was enormous by comparison. The benefit was that high body temperature supported a rapid healing response. Human tissue repaired itself faster than any other known saffron species. Not dramatically faster, but consistently reliably faster across the whole body. The mass range was large. The life sign data showed a significant spread. Humans varied considerably in size and build within their own species more so than Breath did. What was consistent was density. Humans were dense. The metabolic scan confirmed it. High bone density, significant muscle mass, a cardiovascular system that was for a species of their size oversized. They were built in a physical sense for more sustained exertion than their size suggested. There are historical records, Nevin said, from the period before the collective made formal contact with humanity, when we were observing them at a distance. Some of those records are medical in nature, picked up from their own broadcasts, their own data transmissions. I had Foss pull the relevant sections. Foss looked at the table. He had pulled them. He had spent an hour reading them, and then spent another hour thinking about whether to include them in the briefing. He had included them. Humans have a specific biological response to extreme physical danger. Nevin said their bodies produce a chemical compound. They call it adrenaline. When they are badly injured, frightened, or under extreme threat, this compound floods their system. It suppresses their pain response. It increases their strength and speed. It allows them to continue functioning through injuries that would incapacitate most known species. She let that sit. Suppresses pain, Goss repeated. Substantially, not completely, but enough that a human with serious injuries can continue to act, to fight, to operate complex systems for a period of time that is difficult to predict from the outside. The injury is still there. Their body simply doesn't fully register it at the moment. She thought about the Unyielding. She thought about an engagement where a human warship lost 80 crew in the first pass, and the remaining crew kept fighting and killed 3 ships. She thought about what it meant that those remaining crew might have been injured, might have been operating damaged stations in damaged sections of a damaged ship, and their own biology had helped them set that aside long enough to finish the fight. "There is something else," she said, "also historical, also from their own records." She paused. This was the part she had thought longest about. "Humans," she said, "have a documented psychological pattern in crisis situations. Most species, when facing a sufficiently large threat, a threat that registers as unsurvivable, experience escalating fear responses that impair function. The bigger the threat, the more compromised the response. It is a biological protection mechanism. At a certain point, the mind says this cannot be survived and begins preparing accordingly." Goss nodded. This was understood. This was how most species worked. "Humans," Nevin said, "do not consistently follow this pattern." She put the historical records on the table display. Incidents, dozens of them pulled from human archives, military records, civilian disaster reports, medical literature. Incidents in which individual humans or groups of humans had faced threats that should, by any reasonable biological calculus, have produced complete functional shutdown, situations that were unsurvivable by any objective measure. And what had happened instead? They had kept going. Not all of them, not always, not without cost. The records showed the psychological damage done and showed what it took from them afterward. But in the moment, in the fight, something else had happened instead of shutting down. Some of them had gotten angry. "There is a secondary response," Nevin said quietly, "documented across their history. When fear reaches a level that should produce paralysis, some humans, not all, but enough, convert it. The biological system that produces the fear response is repurposed. It becomes aggression. The worse the situation, the more dangerous the opponent, the harder some of them push back." The briefing room was very quiet. "They have a word for it," Voss said, reading from his notes. He pronounced it carefully. "Diance." Nobody spoke for a moment. Goss broke the silence. "You're describing a species that becomes more dangerous when threatened." "I'm describing a species," Nevin said, "for which a sufficiently large threat can produce an increase in combat effectiveness rather than a decrease." She looked around the table. "I want to be careful about how I say this. This is not universal. It is not guaranteed, but it is documented. It is real, and it is part of why the collective strategic assessments have historically recommended maintaining extremely cautious and respectful relations with human space." She thought about Captain Voss for about 11 years on the unyielding asterisk about killing all 3 of them, delivered in a voice like flat water. She thought about what it took for a voice to sound like that. Sevrath was about to close the briefing when his communicator chimed. "Ooh, from the bridge. Commander, the Unyielding is hailing us again. Captain Voss." He looked at the table at his senior staff at the scanned data on the display. "Put it through to the briefing room." The channel opened. Voss's voice came through without preamble, direct as she had been all day. "Commander, I need to tell you something. I'd rather you hear it from me than pick it up on your sensors and wonder." "Go ahead, Captain." "The object in our cargo section. The one I told you about earlier." "Yes, it's changed." Seth sat very still. "Changed how?" "The signal it's been broadcasting for 3 weeks. It's been a single repeating pattern. Quiet, steady, almost like a heartbeat. About 40 minutes ago, it changed. The pattern is more complex now. Multiple frequencies. Our communications team has been running it, and they think of a pause. They think it might be responding to something." "Responding to what?" "That's what we're trying to determine." Her voice was calm. It was always calm, but there was something careful in it now. Something that was working to stay calm rather than simply being it. The best current theory is that it reacted to external signal traffic. Specifically, and I want to be straightforward with you about this, Commander, the theory is that it reacted to our conversation, to the active communication channel between your ship and mine. The briefing room was so quiet Sevrath could hear the ship breathing around them. "It's responding to communication," he said. "Possibly that's one interpretation." She paused. "The other interpretation is that it was waiting for something specific, something that our communications traffic contains, that the open broadcast it's been sending was designed to find. We don't know which interpretation is correct," she said. "What I know is that something has changed, and I committed to being straight with you." Seth looked at Nevin across the table. She was writing quickly. Her pen moved fast and hard, the way it did when she was not being careful about the pressure because her mind was somewhere else. "Captain," he said, "the battle site where you found this object, how old did you estimate it was?" A pause. Our geologists looked at the debris field, the dispersal pattern, and the material degradation. The best estimate was between 100 and 150 years. But she said, and the word sat in the air, the object itself, the material composition of the object. Our materials team said something different. How is it different? A longer pause this time. They said the object was significantly older than the battle site. The battle site was about 150 years old. The object, whatever it was made of, however it was built, their estimate was in the thousands of years, maybe older. Something took it to that battle site. She said, "It wasn't made there. It was brought there by something we have no record of." She stopped. "Let that settle." "Whatever it is," Captain Voss said, "it survived the battle. Everything else in that debris field is dust and fragments. This is intact, warm, and as of 40 minutes ago, talking." Seth thought about the history he had read of this region of space. The collective's records went back 400 years with reliable detail. Before that, fragments. Before that, silence. There was a period in the very old astronomical surveys where this region had shown evidence of significant conflict energies that shouldn't have been there naturally. Debris that suggested objects of enormous size had been destroyed, old enough that no one had a clear idea of who had been fighting, or why, or what had happened to them after. Old enough to predate every species currently alive in this part of the galaxy. "Captain," he said. "Yes." "What is your containment status?" "Stable. The shielding is holding. Whatever change is happening, it's internal to the object. There's no indication of any physical change, no radiation, no hazardous output. It's just the signal. But we're taking it in anyway," she said. "Faster than planned. My escort group confirms they can move on short notice. We'll be leaving within the hour. Understood." Seth said, "We won't hold you. You're welcome to follow if you want at a respectful distance." A brief pause might be useful to have another set of eyes. Sevrath thought about that. He thought about the 6-hour transmission delay to the nearest collective station. He thought about the object in the cargo hold of the Unyielding that had been built by something no one could identify and had been sitting warm and quiet in a debris field for thousands of years and was now 40 minutes ago doing something new. He thought about how there were things you ran from and things you followed, and the hard part was usually knowing which was which. "I'll be in contact, Captain," he said. "We'll be here until departure. Voss out." The channel closed. Breath spoke first. "Commander, are we actually considering following them?" Sevrath looked at the display on the table, at the data they had spent the whole day gathering, at the shape of the Unyielding and its layered hull and its 42 guns, and its 4 and 12 people who had been through enough that their captain said, "We don't panic," like it was a learned technique and not just a thing you said. He looked at the note Nevin had just finished writing. She slid it across the table to him. He read it in 2 sentences. "Whatever that object is, it has been silent for longer than our species has existed. Something made me start talking today." He put the note down. "Contact command," he said. "Shortest possible delay, priority channel. Tell them everything." He stood up. "And tell them we are holding position and awaiting instructions." He walked to the door, stopped. "Also tell them," he said, "that if they're going to send instructions, they should send them fast." He went back to the bridge. The Unyielding sat in the dark outside, patient as a mountain, its cargo hold quietly rearranging everything anyone thought they knew about who had been in this part of the galaxy first. Command's response came in 5 hours and 40 minutes. It was shorter than Sevrath expected. He had sent them everything. The full scan data, Voss's file on the larger fleet classes, Nevin's biological analysis, the transcript of every exchange with Captain Voss, and the report on the object in the cargo hold and what it had started doing 40 minutes into their conversation. 5 hours and 40 minutes later, the response was 11 sentences. He read it twice standing at his console on the bridge. Then he set it down and was still for a moment. Goss appeared on his shoulder. "Commander, they want a full written report," Sevrath said. "Standard observation format, priority classification. And they say hold position. Do not engage. Maintain respectful communication." He paused. "They also say, and I'm reading this directly, do not under any circumstances interfere with human operations or give any indication of alarm." Goss absorbed this. "They're frightened." "They're careful," Sarath said. He folded the message. "Which is the right response? The collective didn't get 400 years old by being stupid." He went back to the display wall. The unyielding was still there. The escort group had formed up around it in a loose diamond pattern. 3 asterisk javelins and the bastion asterisk surrounding the cruiser with the easy practice geometry of ships that had done this many times before. They were preparing to move. He could see the drive signatures warming up. Whatever was in the cargo hold, the humans were taking it somewhere with a great deal of company. He thought that was probably wise. It was Ulu who noticed the change in the signal. She had been monitoring the object's broadcast since Voss had told them about it quietly on a secondary sensor channel. The way you kept one eye on something that wasn't a threat yet, but might become relevant. The signal had been complex and multi-frequency since the change. A layered pattern that the Patience of Stars asterisk communication array could receive, but not decode. It sounded, if you played it through the audio system, like several things speaking at different speeds over each other. Not unpleasant, just completely unreadable. Then 20 minutes before the unyielding was scheduled to depart, it changed again. Commander Uhl said her voice was very controlled. The object's signal, it shifted. How it's narrowed. It was broadcasting in all directions simultaneously. Now it's directional. She checked her console once more. I checked it again. "Commander, it is broadcasting directly at us." The bridge went quiet. Not the ordinary quiet of professionalism, the quiet of people who had been alert all day and had just been handed a reason to be more alert than that. Seth walked to Uhl's station. He looked at the sensor display. She was right. The signal had tightened from an omnidirectional broadcast to a precise directed beam aimed at the exact position of the asterisk Patience of Stars in space. Something in the cargo hold of the unyielding had noticed them. "Can we decode it?" he asked. "We've been trying since the first change," Uhl said. "Still nothing. The pattern is unlike any communication format in our database." She paused. "But there is one thing I can tell you. The signal is structured. It is not random noise. Whatever is producing it intentionally. There is a pattern inside the pattern. We just don't have the key." Seth straightened up. He thought about thousands of years. He thought about a battle site so old that the debris had half dissolved back into space dust and one object sitting in the middle of it intact, waiting. His communicator chimed. Voss. He answered it before the second chime. "Commander, I assume you're seeing what we're seeing." "We are. It is broadcasting directly to us now." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "I want you to know that our containment is still holding. Whatever it's doing, it is doing it without any change in its physical state. No radiation, no thermal shift, no structural change. It is purely the signal. Has your team made any progress decoding it?" Some pause. "I want to be careful about how I say this because my team is still working, and what they have is preliminary." "Tell me anyway." She was quiet for a moment. He heard her breathe once. "The signal has 3 layers. Our communications team has been pulling it apart piece by piece. The outermost layer, the one that changed first, appears to be a kind of identifier, a marker, something that says asterisk here. I am an asterisk in a format designed to be noticed rather than read. The middle layer is more complex. They think it may be data compressed, encoded in a format they haven't cracked yet. Could be text, could be imagery, could be something we don't have a category for. And the third layer? Sevrath asked. Voss was quiet for a longer moment, long enough that he wondered if the channel had dropped. The third layer, she said finally, is the one that started 2 hours ago when we began talking to you. Our team thinks, and again, this is preliminary. This is careful and cautious. And I'm not stating it as fact. They think the third layer is a response. A response to what? To the presence of two different species communicating with each other. A pause. They think this thing was built to do something specific when it detected two or more distinct species in contact with each other. As if it was designed to wait for exactly that situation and then react. Seth sat down in his command chair. He didn't usually sit down in the middle of a watch. He sat down now. He thought about something very old sitting in a debris field. Sitting there through decades and centuries, broadcasting its quiet heartbeat signal into the dark, waiting not for one species, for two, for the specific moment when two different kinds of minds found each other in the same piece of space and started talking. He thought about what kind of intelligence built something like that, what they had expected to find, what they had hoped across however many thousands of years would eventually happen. "Captain," he said, "what do you think it's trying to say?" A long pause. "My linguist thinks it might be a record," Voss said slowly. "Something left behind deliberately. The way you'd leave a message for someone who comes after you." Another pause. "She says that's the most consistent interpretation of the data layer structure. It has the shape of a history. A very long one. A history of what? We don't know yet. That part we can't read." Her voice was careful. Even the same voice she used for everything, but there was something underneath it now. Not fear. Something adjacent to fear. Something that looked like fear from a distance, but was actually a kind of very serious attention. "But here is the thing I keep coming back to, Commander. Whatever species built this, they're gone. Whatever they built it to say, they didn't survive long enough to say it themselves. So, they built something that would wait and say it for them. Static, the hum of space. They built it to find someone to tell." The Unyielding departed 40 minutes later. The drive signatures of the escort group flared up clean and precise, and the 5 ships began moving together in the tight, coordinated way of a formation that had practice until it was automatic. The Bastion moved into the center. The Javelins took the points. The Unyielding slotted in behind the carrier with the ease of long familiarity. Before they jumped, Captain Voss opened the channel one last time. "Commander Sevrath. Captain, thank you for the company and for being straight with us." "Thank you for the same." He said a pause. He thought she was done. "Then I'll have my people send your team whatever we decode when we figure out what it's saying." Another pause. "It seems like the kind of thing you'd want to know." He thought about that. An ancient message built to be delivered to two species at once. Built to wait until two species were in the same place talking to each other before it said what it had to say. "I'd want to know," he confirmed. "Yes." "Then you'll know," she said. Voss out. The channel closed. The 5 human ships jumped cleanly and all at once, and the space where they had been was empty again. No blip on the display wall, no orange light, just the Delvari expanse. Cold and quiet the way it had been before the day started. Seth sat in his chair and looked at the empty display for a while. He wrote the report himself. He usually delegated reports. This one he wrote himself at his console, while the asterisk patience of stars began the long route back to the nearest collective station. He wrote it in the standard observation format the command had asked for. He included the scan data, the conversation transcripts, all of Nevin's analysis, all of Foss's files. He included the signal data from the object, and the preliminary decode results Voss's team had shared with Uhl before departure. He was thorough and accurate, and he did not editorialize until the final section. The final section of a patrol observation report was labeled *Commander Assessment. It was the section where the officer in command of the vessel offered their personal interpretation of events and any recommendations arising from the encounter. It was usually brief, usually cautious, usually written in careful language that acknowledged multiple possibilities and committed to nothing. Seth wrote this in 3 hours. He rewrote it twice. Then he left it as it was and attached it to the report. It reads in the plain, formal breath of official documentation as follows. We encountered one human warship, an older vessel by their standards, a common type. The ship was crewed by 412 people, which is roughly half the complement a Wreath vessel of equivalent size would carry. This is not because humans are inefficient. It is because they build their ships to keep functioning after losing people, and they build their crews to keep functioning after losing friends. They have engineered resilience into every layer of what they make, including the people. The weapons I will not list again here. They are in the scan appendix. I will note only that the ship we encountered is a routine patrol vessel, and that the humans have several hundred of them, and that above that class, they have heavier ones, and above those heavier ones still this is known. What I did not fully understand before today is what the weapons mean in context. The hull of the unyielding Asterisk shows battle damage from many engagements across many years. The ship has taken fire that should have ended it. It has not ended. Its captain has commanded it for 11 years through 5 major engagements. She speaks of the worst of them, a 3.1 ambush in which she lost 80 crew members in the opening exchange, the way one might speak of difficult weather. She speaks of killing all 3 ships that attacked her the same way. I am not reporting this to alarm the collective. I am reporting it because I think it is important to understand what kind of species we are maintaining diplomatic relations with. Humans are not powerful because of their weapons. Many species have built powerful weapons. Most of those species are not around to discuss the subject. Humans are powerful because of what happens to them when things go wrong. Their biology is designed for damage. Their psychology, in many documented cases, converts crisis into aggression rather than paralysis. Their ships are built to absorb destruction and keep moving. Their crews are built to absorb loss and keep fighting. And when they find something ancient and unknown and possibly dangerous sitting in a debris field in deep space, they pick it up, put it in their cargo hold, and take it somewhere safe to be studied. Not because they are reckless, because they believe in knowing things even when the knowing is uncomfortable, especially then. The object they carried is not my primary concern. Whatever. It contains history, warning, information we cannot yet read. It will be studied, and we will learn what it says in time. That is not what I keep thinking about. What I keep thinking about is this Asterisk. Something built that object thousands of years ago. Something intelligent, capable of extraordinary engineering, capable of thinking far enough ahead to leave a message for civilizations that didn't exist yet. They are gone. Whatever ended them completely. Not a fragment of their living culture remains in any record the collective holds. The humans found the message they left behind. The message activated. It activated because 2 different species were talking to each other in its presence. Which means whoever built it believed that 2 species talking to each other was worth leaving a message for, worth waiting for across thousands of years. That, I think, is the most important thing I encountered today. Not the weapons, not the whole, not even the object. The idea that somewhere a very long time ago, something looked far enough forward to believe this moment was possible. 2 different species, one old battered warship and one small patrol vessel talking. I do not know what the message says. I know that the humans will find out, and that they will tell us because Captain Voss said they would, and she does not appear to be the kind of person who says things she doesn't mean. My recommendation is that the collective continue and deepen its diplomatic engagement with humanity, not from fear, though respect is warranted and should be maintained, but because the galaxy is a very large place, and we do not yet know everything that is in it. We know there are things out there that ended civilizations that were capable of extraordinary things. If whatever is out there comes for us, I would rather be talking to the humans than not. I would rather they know our name. Commander Savathk * Patience of Stars * Delvari, Expanse Patrol Station filed this date. He read it back once. He changed nothing. He sent it. 6 weeks later, a data packet arrived on the * Patience of Stars from a human research station flagged for Sevrath's attention. Origin listed as UEES unyielding forwarded through the official diplomatic relay between human space and the collective. Attached was a short message from Captain Voss. Commander, our linguistics team cracked the outer data layer. I said I'd tell you. It's a record. The species that built the object called themselves something our translation renders as the first walkers. They were here a long time ago. The record is long. We're still working through it. But the part we've read so far is a history of what ended them. They weren't destroyed by another species. Something else. Something that came from outside the region. They called it the Silence. Not a species. A phenomenon. Something that moved through this part of the galaxy and erased everything it touched. They built the object to survive it, to warn whoever came after. The record says they fought it for a long time. They lost, but they fought. I thought you should know. We're going back out to the debris field with a full research team. If there are more objects out there, we're going to find them. Voss *. Seth read the message 3 times. He thought about the Silence, something that came from outside and erased everything it touched, and a species that had fought it for a long time and lost, but fought. He thought about the unyielding *, battered and scarred, and still going. He thought about 412 people in a ship built to survive the unsurvivable, going back out to the place where they had found the message, to look for more. Not because they had to, because they needed to know. He put the message down on his console and looked out at the stars. They were very beautiful and very old, and they said nothing. Somewhere out in them, the unyielding was already moving.